History is full of chilling mysteries, lost villages, masked prisoners, coded books, and vanished souls. But what if some of the creepiest legends you've heard were actually real? And even more disturbing, what if they were finally solved, revealing truths stranger than fiction? In this video, we're diving into 5 terrifying historical cases that were once thought unsolvable, but now, the answers have come to light. You've never heard history told like this. The Screaming Crypt of Bellmore Abbey. For over 3 centuries, the villagers of Wiltshire, England, whispered about the eerie crypt beneath the crumbling Bellmore Abbey. The tales always returned to one name, Lady Eleanor Statham. She was once a noblewoman of grace and influence during the 17th century, the last of the Statham lineage to be buried beneath the Abbey's stone floor. But her resting place was anything but peaceful. Those who visited the crypt often spoke of strange sensations. Some reported hearing muffled cries. Others claimed they felt an inexplicable coldness, even on summer days. The boldest few who dared to stay longer than a minute would later recount a scratching noise, faint but insistent, like fingernails clawing against wood. Local priests insisted it was simply the wind echoing through the hollow chambers. Yet no one stayed long enough to prove otherwise. By the early 1800s, Bellmore Abbey was abandoned. The walls were crumbling, ivy strangled the arches, and its once glorious stained-glass windows were nothing more than shattered fragments of color. Still, no one dared desecrate the crypt. Not because of law or faith, but fear. The legend had grown so embedded in the local consciousness that even grave robbers avoided it. The tale of Lady Eleanor's tragic fate had many versions. In the most enduring one, she had died of fever in 1667. But her servants, upon sealing her coffin, had claimed they heard a thud, a single, sharp bang, from inside. A sign, they believed, that her soul was restless. One servant fled the estate that night and was never seen again. In her will, Eleanor had requested a burial with her wedding ring, an exquisite ruby set in platinum. Some said the ring was cursed, a gift from her secret lover, not her husband. Rumors of betrayal, jealousy, and murder simmered beneath the surface, but no evidence ever emerged. Generations passed, and the story became little more than a ghost tale told in candlelit pubs. Until 1974. That year, the Historical Society of Wiltshire began a restoration project on the Abbey grounds, hoping to preserve what little remained. Architect Thomas Harrow was overseeing the crypt restoration. A skeptical man in his mid-40s, Harrow had no patience for local folklore. On his first descent into the crypt, he found the place structurally sound but damp, filled with mold and centuries of dust. But as he examined the crypt's central tomb, Eleanor's, something peculiar caught his attention. The tombstone bore no visible damage, yet a faint vibration could be felt when he placed his hand upon it. Curious, he returned the next day with audio equipment. He captured nothing unusual until the third night, when the recorder picked up a single faint tapping noise at 2:14 a.m. The sound repeated exactly 3 times, then stopped. Compelled by both curiosity and unease, Harrow petitioned the society to allow him to open the tomb. His request was initially denied. Disturbing noble graves was a controversial matter. But after sharing his recordings and showing evidence of a slight shift in the stone's foundation, they relented. On the morning of October 11, 1974, Harrow and his team carefully removed the heavy slab. Beneath it lay an ornately carved wooden coffin, its surface remarkably preserved. As they lifted the lid, they were shocked to find another coffin beneath, a simple, iron-bound box, hidden under the original like a secret compartment. When they opened the second coffin, the room went silent. Inside were skeletal remains, not of a woman, but a man. His arms were twisted above his head, fingers shattered, the wood inside the lid clawed in frantic desperation. His jaw was dislocated, likely from screaming. Time had mummified his agony. It was a horrifying sight. Further examination of the bones revealed the man had died from asphyxiation, not poison or disease. He had been buried alive. At first, many speculated it was a mistake, perhaps a servant wrongly buried. But as historians dug deeper into Eleanor's past, a darker theory emerged. Records uncovered in the nearby county archive revealed letters exchanged between Eleanor and a man named Alaric Gray, a poet of low birth. The letters spoke of secret meetings, of love, and of her desire to flee her cruel husband, Lord Benedict Statham. She never did. Historians believe that Lord Statham discovered the affair. Eleanor fell suddenly ill just weeks later, too suddenly for it to be natural, some claimed. At her funeral, it was noted that Lord Statham was dry-eyed and calm, an unusual demeanor for a grieving husband. The theory that emerged was chilling. Lord Statham had lured Alaric to the crypt, drugged him, and entombed him alive beneath Eleanor's coffin, a final act of revenge. No one ever suspected such a heinous act. No one, until Harrow's discovery. As the truth surfaced, the legend of the screams was no longer folklore. It was real. For centuries, villagers had been hearing the final cries of a man who died in the dark, beneath stone and silence. After the investigation, Alaric's remains were reburied in a marked grave outside the Abbey grounds, and Lady Eleanor's tomb was restored with a new inscription. Here rests Eleanor Statham, whose love outlived death and silence. The crypt remains closed to this day, a solemn monument to a mystery solved, but never forgotten. The Vanishing Battalion of Dark Hollow. In the final year of the American Civil War, as snow fell over Pennsylvania's ridges and valleys, a Confederate detachment of 87 men marched north through the Blue Ridge foothills. They were led by Captain Elijah Vance, a seasoned soldier with a reputation for bold tactics and unwavering discipline. On November 12, 1864, his unit was tasked with flanking a Union supply line through the region known as Dark Hollow, a dense and fog-laced forest that locals had long avoided. The soldiers were seen entering the tree line at dawn. They never emerged. What followed became one of the Civil War's most chilling legends. When scouts were sent to find the battalion 3 days later, they found no blood, no bodies, no discarded equipment. Just broken branches and boot prints that ended inexplicably in the middle of a clearing. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. Within weeks, the story spread among soldiers on both sides. Whispers of curses, ghost soldiers, and a living fog became campfire fuel. The Union officially listed the men as missing in action, while the Confederacy declared them deserters, despite Vance's sterling reputation. After the war, Dark Hollow became the center of folklore. Locals spoke of soldiers seen walking the woods in silence, their faces pale and eyes hollow. Some even claimed they heard muffled drumbeats deep within the forest on cold nights. The hollow was deemed cursed ground. No one built near it. Hunters avoided it. The trees grew thick and twisted, and in winter, a permanent mist curled through its glens. The mystery of the Vanishing Battalion was left unsolved for over a century, until 2 hikers changed everything. In the summer of 2002, brothers Dean and Michael Halpert were backpacking through the Allegheny foothills when they veered off trail during a thunderstorm. Seeking shelter, they stumbled upon a rockslide at the base of a cliff deep in Dark Hollow. Amid the rubble, they noticed something strange. A rusted rifle barrel protruding from the ground. Curious, they dug further and discovered an opening, the collapsed entrance to a cave. When authorities were notified, a full archaeological team was brought in. Over the next 2 months, excavations revealed a sprawling cave system that stretched beneath the hillside, and inside were human remains. Dozens of skeletons were found in collapsed chambers and along narrow stone passages. The bones were dressed in tattered gray uniforms, with insignias matching Confederate rank and division markings. Weapons, buttons, journals, and even half-preserved food rations were discovered alongside them. The journals belonged to Captain Elijah Vance. The entries told a grim and claustrophobic tale. Vance had chosen to move his unit through the caves after scouts warned of an approaching Union force. The caves, once used by miners decades before the war, had seemed like the perfect path to outflank the enemy. But the deeper they went, the more disoriented they became. The fog outside seemed to seep in through unseen cracks. Their lanterns flickered erratically. One entry described hearing whispers and the sensation of being followed. Men began to panic. 2 soldiers went missing. Then 4. Vance ordered the unit to retreat, but by then, a cave-in had sealed the original entrance. Their only option was to press forward and search for an exit. Days turned into weeks. Food ran out. So did hope. The last pages of Vance's journal, written in a near-unreadable scrawl, hinted at the onset of madness. He described the cave changing, with tunnels appearing where none had been, and others disappearing behind them. Men began to turn on each other. Some claimed to see figures deeper in the dark, soldiers who weren't part of their unit. Whether these were hallucinations, echoes of guilt, or something more sinister, no one would ever know. The journal ends with a final line, "I hear them drumming again. We are not alone." Modern analysis confirmed the battalion had died from starvation, exposure, and injuries from multiple collapses. The cave system was dangerously unstable, and due to shifting rock formations, it was likely their voices and sounds had echoed in unnatural ways, creating the illusion of being watched or followed. Still, something unnerving remained. Among the artifacts recovered was a tin whistle. It was still capable of producing sound. When archaeologists blew into it, they noticed something eerie. The sound it made echoed in a perfect rhythm, 3 short blasts, like a distant military signal, and then returned in reverse. Sound engineers suggested it was an auditory illusion caused by cave acoustics. But those who had spent time in the chamber said it felt deliberate. The discovery closed a chapter that had haunted Pennsylvania for over a century. The Vanishing Battalion hadn't been cursed, nor abducted by some supernatural force. They had simply made a desperate decision that turned into a fatal trap. In 2004, a memorial was erected outside the newly named Vance Caverns. It lists all 87 names of the lost unit, along with an inscription from Vance's journal. "In silence we marched. In silence we remain." Local legends persist, of course. Campers still claim to hear soft marching footsteps in the woods around the site. And every November 12th, the anniversary of their disappearance, some report the sound of a single, mournful whistle echoing across the trees. The portrait that whispered. The Cierasi Gallery in Venice, Italy, stood as one of the city's lesser-known art museums, tucked away between aging canals and shadowy stone alleys. Its walls were filled with forgotten Renaissance works, but one portrait in particular captured the obsession of art historians, thrill-seekers, and paranormal enthusiasts alike. It was the painting of Contessa Serafina Moretti, a noblewoman whose beauty was said to rival the angels, and whose tragic story was as mesmerizing as her image. Painted in 1811 by her cousin and rumored lover, Giulio Moretti, the portrait displayed Serafina seated against a crimson backdrop, her expression serene but her eyes carrying an unsettling depth. The artist had rendered her so lifelike that many visitors described feeling watched as they passed by. But it wasn't the artistry alone that made the painting infamous. For over a century, night guards and museum staff claimed the painting whispered. Not in metaphor. Not in superstition. Actual, audible whispers. Some heard soft crying. Others said they could make out fragmented sentences, like, "He's lying," or "Not my hand." A few claimed the voice repeated the name, Giulio, in breathless gasps. The strange phenomena always happened at night, and always when the room temperature dropped sharply, even during Venice's hot summers. 3 separate curators over the course of 70 years died under mysterious circumstances, all of them closely associated with the painting. One suffered a heart attack alone in the gallery hall. Another was found at home, face pale and eyes wide, having scribbled the word, "Forgive," dozens of times in a notebook. The third reportedly fell into a canal one foggy evening. His body was never recovered. By the late 20th century, the museum had cordoned off the room with the portrait and offered it only on private viewing by request. Most Venetians avoided it altogether. But in 1988, the mystery began to unravel, not by a priest or a psychic, but by a sound technician named Arturo Vecchi. Vecchi had been contracted by the museum to help with environmental monitoring, humidity, vibration, and sound, in preparation for an upcoming renovation. His task was to install discrete sensors and audio monitors in older wings of the building, including the Serafina room. Having heard the stories, Vecchi decided to run a full overnight audio capture just to see what the fuss was about. What he heard the next morning chilled him to his bones. Between 2:41 and 2:46 a.m., the recording captured faint noises resembling weeping. Then, a single female voice whispered something in Italian. "È stata una bugia." It was a lie. Over the next hour, more fragments followed, including, "Non era la mia mano." It wasn't my hand. "Lui ha tradito entrambi." He betrayed us both. The voice repeated, "Giulio, Giulio." Vecchi initially thought it was interference, possibly an audio loop picked up from outside. But the sensors were isolated. There was no logical explanation. Driven by curiosity and a growing sense of dread, he removed the portrait from the wall the following night, hoping to trace wiring or hidden sources. What he discovered was astonishing. Behind the painting's frame was a narrow compartment. Inside was a wax cylinder, an early form of sound recording from the late 19th century, along with a primitive playback device rigged to be pressure-sensitive. It activated when the room cooled enough to contract the old brass wire connected to the frame's backing. The portrait whispered when it got cold. But why? And who had placed the cylinder? Upon restoring the audio using modern equipment, experts recovered the full message. It was Serafina's voice, or rather, a recording made decades after her death, likely by someone pretending to be her. In the recording, she confesses that she never took her own life, as had long been believed. According to Venice's aristocratic records, Serafina had fallen into despair and drowned herself in 1813, just 2 years after the portrait was painted. Her death was ruled a suicide caused by unrequited love, a tragic ending that cemented her as a symbol of romantic suffering. But the recording revealed something else. The woman in the audio accused her husband, Count Vittorio Moretti, of murder. She claimed he had poisoned her and forged her final letter. The motive? Jealousy. Vittorio had discovered her affair with Giulio and had exacted revenge, not only by killing Serafina, but by framing Giulio as well, who was later found dead in a supposed drunken fall down the stairs. The final line of the recording said, "They erased me. He framed Giulio. Tell them I was murdered." Museum records showed that in 1893, the painting had been removed temporarily for structural reinforcement. That same year, Vittorio's great-grandson Lorenzo Moretti, an amateur inventor and known recluse, briefly took stewardship of the painting. It is now believed Lorenzo, having uncovered family secrets, created the hidden playback device as a confession of the truth too dangerous to share openly. He placed it in the painting as a warning, or perhaps as penance. When the truth came to light, forensic historians petitioned for Serafina's death to be reclassified. While her body could not be exhumed, her grave had flooded and disintegrated in a flood. The city posthumously declared her death suspicious and removed references to suicide from her memorial. The painting still hangs in the Cia Rossi Gallery today, but under new lighting and preservation methods that prevent the temperature shifts once needed to activate the device. The wax cylinder was preserved and moved to a vault. But every year, on the anniversary of Serafina's death, the museum plays the full recording in a special closed session. Those who hear it say the voice feels far too real. Some say they feel cold as it plays, even in warm rooms. Others swear her eyes in the portrait seem wetter, almost glistening, as if the truth, at long last, still hurts. The Silent Village of Nõk. Deep in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania lies a nearly forgotten village, Nõk. It doesn't appear on most modern maps, and even local guides shake their heads when asked about it. The story of Nõk has become a kind of hush-spoken legend in nearby regions, referred to only as Satel Mut, the Silent Village. According to scattered records, Nõk was a functioning village as far back as the early 1700s. It was isolated, nestled between dense forests and towering cliffs, accessible only by a single winding path. The residents were mostly woodcutters and shepherds, known for being devout, secretive, and strangely insular. But in January of 1878, something happened. The village fell completely silent. A trader named Istvan Carmen, who visited the village monthly to sell salt and oil, arrived that winter to find something horrifying. The entire village was deserted, but not in the way you might expect. Fires still burned in hearths. Food sat uneaten on tables. Clothes were frozen on wash lines. Livestock wandered loose. But there were no people. Not a single soul, no bodies, no blood, no footprints leading away. 29 people had vanished without a trace. Carmen fled and alerted local authorities in Cebu. Within 2 days, a gendarmerie patrol arrived to investigate. What they found only deepened the mystery. In the church at the center of the village, a single word had been carved repeatedly into the wooden pews and walls. Ascult. Listen. The search went on for weeks. No signs of struggle. No signs of disease. No signs of relocation. It was as though the people of Nõk had simply stepped out of reality. The Romanian government closed off the path leading to the village and issued a vague warning about unstable geology and seasonal rockslides. But the story refused to die. For decades, Nõk was considered cursed. Only the brave, or foolish, attempted to reach it. In 1936, a small group of anthropology students from the University of Bucharest set out to find Nõk for a thesis on abandoned settlements. Their professor, Lucian Ionescu, was a folklorist who had compiled many oral tales about the village. He claimed that the villagers were said to be haunted by voices in the woods, voices that called them by name. When the team finally reached Nõk, they found it almost exactly as described in 1878. Weathered, yes. Overgrown. But intact. They camped in what had been the blacksmith's home and began documenting the structures. On the second night, one student, Anton Radulescu, reported hearing his name whispered from outside. Thinking it was a prank, he ignored it. On the third night, he disappeared. Despite an intensive search, Anton was never found. The remaining students, shaken and terrified, abandoned the expedition. When they returned, they spoke of unearthly silence, of an absence of birds, wind, even insects. It was like the world held its breath, one said. Professor Ionescu never published the findings. He died 5 years later, having gone blind and bedridden after a fall he blamed on a shadow that followed him from Nõk. The story might have faded again into myth were it not for a viral blog post in 2014. A Romanian hiker named Emil Dobe uploaded photos of the abandoned village, which he stumbled upon while searching for rare moss formations. His photos showed something new, symbols etched into the snow around the church. Intricate circular patterns with dots and triangles, none of them visible in prior accounts. He claimed that the air in the village was so still he could hear his own heartbeat. He stayed for less than an hour before fleeing after he saw a figure standing inside the church window, motionless, watching him. That blog reignited interest in Nõk, attracting paranormal investigators and independent researchers. Among them was Dr. Sasha Varga, a linguist specializing in pre-Christian Balkan symbols. In 2016, she visited the site herself, accompanied by a cameraman and local guide. They recorded 38 hours of footage before their signal was lost. 3 weeks later, only the guide returned, disoriented, dehydrated, and unable to speak. Not unwilling. Unable. Medical scans showed no trauma, yet his vocal cords were unresponsive. He simply couldn't make a sound. His eyes, however, were alert, terrified. When given a pen, he wrote the word "asculta" over and over. Listen. Authorities banned travel to the area shortly after. Satellite images show the path to Nõk is now overgrown, and recent attempts to locate it via drone have failed due to magnetic interference. Locals now believe Nõk sits atop a place where the veil is thinner. Some believe the villagers were taken, not by death or disease, but by something ancient that called to them in silence. Others think they were silenced forever because they heard something no human was meant to hear. Today, the Silent Village remains one of Europe's most chilling enigmas. Historians argue over its disappearance, scientists dismiss it as folklore, and yet no one can explain the consistent accounts, the carvings, or the final word left behind by those who made it out. And always, the story ends the same way, with one word echoing through time, like a warning: asculta. The Woman in the Iron Mask. In 1768, during the twilight years of Tsarina Catherine the Great's rule, a series of mysterious letters began arriving at the imperial court in St. Petersburg. The letters, written in archaic French, spoke of a woman imprisoned beneath a convent in the Siberian wilderness, a woman who claimed to be of royal blood, and whose identity had been hidden behind an iron mask for more than 50 years. At first, the court dismissed the letters as nonsense, the ravings of a mad monk or revolutionary agitator. But their persistence, and the frightening consistency of the handwriting, caught the Tsarina's attention. She dispatched 2 investigators under royal secrecy, Count Alexei Petrovich, a court historian, and Sister Magdalena, a linguist and former nun with deep ties to the church. Their destination, the remote monastery of St. Kirill, nestled near Lake Baikal. The journey took over a month. When they arrived, they were greeted not with resistance, but with unsettling silence. The monastery was active, but the monks seemed anxious, glancing often toward the eastern wing, a wing said to have been sealed since 1712 after a fire destroyed part of the cellar. Under pressure from the Tsarina's authority, the abbot allowed Petrovich and Sister Magdalena access to the old catacombs beneath the wing. There, behind 3 locked iron doors and a bolted hatch, they found her, the woman in the iron mask. She was old, impossibly so, her skin pale and paper-thin, her back hunched with age. She wore a custom-forged iron mask that obscured her entire face, with no hinges, no way to remove it without tools. She sat in silence on a straw bed, wearing an 18th-century court gown in tatters. She did not speak, but raised her head when they entered, as if she had been expecting them. The mask itself was like nothing the investigators had seen. Not merely a prison, but a work of grotesque art, with etchings of eyes on the sides and a faded sigil across the brow, the coat of arms of the House of Bourbon. Through the use of gesture, Sister Magdalena was able to communicate with the prisoner over several days. The woman's name, she indicated, was Louise Marie. But not just any Louise Marie. She claimed to be the twin sister of King Louis XIV of France. A sister whose existence had been erased from history. According to her fragmented writings, dictated to Magdalena and scrawled in coal across the cellar walls, she had been born minutes after Louis. A girl, unwanted and dangerous to the line of succession. A seer visited their mother during pregnancy and warned that the second child would bring ruin to the crown. Rather than kill her, the royal family hid her away, entrusting her to nuns. But as she grew, Louise Marie developed what she called the knowing, visions of events before they happened. Some proved true. A fire in the palace kitchens. A failed assassination attempt on a visiting noble. A betrayal within the court. Whispers grew that she was cursed, or worse, a witch. At age 16, she was removed from France entirely. Smuggled by royal agents across Europe, she was eventually handed over to Russian monks, paid with gold to keep her in perpetual silence. The iron mask was placed on her when she tried to flee. Petrovich was skeptical. The idea of a hidden twin to the Sun King was absurd. Yet the woman demonstrated a remarkable grasp of 17th-century French court customs, and even recited verbatim the Bourbon lineage, including errors that had been corrected in later official records, as if she knew the original truth. Then came the most disturbing revelation. She told them, through Magdalena, that Catherine's son, Grand Duke Paul, would die violently, and not as Tsar. She described a silver knife, blood on a marble floor, a betrayal by a man in uniform. This terrified Petrovich. Catherine herself had often worried about Paul's temperament and enemies. Could it be true? The investigators returned to St. Petersburg and presented their findings in secret. Catherine ordered the woman's story sealed under royal archive, her mask buried, her name stricken from all reports. But she couldn't ignore the prophecy. In 1801, more than 30 years later, Paul was indeed assassinated, in his bedroom, stabbed with a silver-handled dagger by his own guards. The prophecy came true. When scholars unearthed these events in 1997 during an archival digitization project, they were stunned to find transcripts of Sister Magdalena's communications with the woman. A set of drawings were also found, sketches of the Iron Mask, a birth record torn from a French convent ledger, and even a small embroidered handkerchief bearing the initials LM de F. LM de France. French historians remain divided. There is no official record of a twin to Louis XIV. Yet certain royal midwife accounts mention a difficult delivery, with multiple attendants. No one knows where Louise Marie's body ended up, or whether she ever removed the mask. Today, conspiracy theorists and crypto-historians alike refer to her as the Forgotten Sister. And in the vaults of the State Hermitage Museum lies a mask made of iron, warped with age, bearing the crest of a royal family that insisted she never existed. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?